Welcome to the Visual Effects Notes podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by ftrack and ActionVFX. ftrack is an Academy Award-winning project management, production tracking, and media review platform for the creative industry. I've been using ftrack for the last 6 years, and it has helped me with all my visual effects projects. Forget about all the messy spreadsheets and the shared documents. ftrack is the best way to create a visual effects pipeline and to manage and communicate with your team and clients both locally and remotely. You can go to the video's description below for more information, or you can visit ftrack.com. This episode is also sponsored by ActionVFX. ActionVFX is the best place to get high-quality stock footage. I've used ActionVFX in game cinematics, short films, trailers, and commercials. They are the best stock footage I've ever come across. You can also use the promo code Hugo's Desk for 10% off. Please visit ActionVFX.com to learn more. And now on to the show.
Hi everyone, welcome to the latest VFX Notes podcast. I'm Ian Fales from Befores and Afters, and as always I'm joined by Hugo Guerra from Hugo's Desk. Hi there, Hugo.
Hi Ian, how are you doing? How's everything going? Hello everyone.
Going well down under. How's things in London at the moment?
It's okay. It's cold. It's cold, windy, and wintry, and Christmas all the way. Everyone is just celebrating Christmas, and yeah, it's nice.
Well, today, Hugo, we're going to be talking about Eternals, the latest big Marvel film. We're going to talk about a few sides of it, the visual effects side, what we thought of the film.
Yep.
Also a bit about the director, because it seems like a movie where Marvel brought in an indie director to shake things up a bit. Just before we get into the film, Hugo, one of the new things we're doing with the VFX Notes podcast is about Patreon, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes. So if anyone likes our podcast, if you guys enjoy the content we're putting out, you should know that you can now go to either my Patreon at Hugo's Desk or Before and After's Patreon from Ian, where you can sign up to the lowest tier. And if you do that, you get the episode 3 days before everyone else. That means you can watch it, before everyone else, before it's a public thing. So yeah, we'd really appreciate if you want to support the show. Please help us out there, because it will really help us develop the show and have more episodes and make this a more regular thing as well. So yeah, thank you so much if you could help us.
Yes, thank you if you choose to support us that way. Of course, the podcast will be available on YouTube for free just 3 days later than everyone else gets it on Patreon.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much. Okay, Eternals. Hugo, maybe we should start with like we always do, a sort of review. I hate saying review because I don't want to say a film is good or bad. But
yeah.
I'm going to lay it on you first, though. What did you think of Eternals?
I don't know, well, first of all, I must say this film is by far the most complicated film probably from the MCU. It's really complicated, and it's really thick of lore. And I thought, Ian, that the film is good and bad. And there's some really brilliant moments and some really cringing moments. And the film is just very uneven. And I think it has a bit to do with the discussion we're going to have a bit later about the directors and about how indie directors are now sometimes coming into these blockbusters. I really feel the film has a personality problem where you really have unbalanced scenes. But I don't know. I thought, for example, the contemplation moments were quite incredible. The space moments were quite incredible. The film has this really cool theme, of the Eternals and space, and we're such a small speck on the middle of all of this. It made me really feel small, I think the film does manage to achieve that really cool part, and it has that, but then it has also some really cringing parts, with really small little conversations. It also has quite a lot of historical things for MCU. It has the first sex scene of the MCU. It has the first same-sex kiss of the MCU. It has the first deaf actor on the MCU as well. So it has a lot of firsts. The film is definitely very diverse, and I love that. And I felt that it was like a really melting pot. It felt really fresh. But I don't know, I'm conflicted. I want to hear what you have to say as well. We'll keep talking a bit more about it, but I'm conflicted.
That's an interesting thing to say, it felt fresh, because it did, actually. You really had no idea where it was going, which is, in some ways, for a film, really good. In other ways, I feel like Marvel had almost created, in the 20 billion films that it has already released, it was getting a bit samey, but that's okay, because the audience was into that. Two acts in every film were sort of like a big mystery, and then there tended to be a huge, climactic battle. There actually is a big battle in this film, but I was never quite sure that it was leading up to that. Yeah. Hugo, I actually enjoyed this as a movie-going experience. The biggest takeaway I had was every other Marvel film, you really, especially the non-Endgame ones, the non, Avengers ones, you're with one character mostly. And so you're kind of rooting for Iron Man or Thor or Black Widow. And here, of course, because I think there's 10 main characters, you could say there's more than that. You really, just like as a practical thing, you can't be with just one character. And I think that was just by the nature of the Eternals storyline itself. But I found that meant, you were watching Icarus, you were watching another character. See, I'm already blanking on some of the names. And it just found it harder to follow. Or you switched off a bit if that particular character line story wasn't what you wanted to see.
Yeah. I think that is definitely, it's on my list of the bad parts of the film. The other Avenger films managed to do this because they've had all the origin stories first, so you didn't have to go through the origin story. Yeah. And it's a shame because I really wanted to have an origin story. One of my favorite characters were Droog, I thought it was fascinating. He could control people, he could control the minds. Man, that's a film right there. Like the way he does that, and it's so creepy with his eyes and the little lights and everything. That story is a film. Come on, it's amazing. And also, of course, Icarus, he's Superman. That's another film there. Yeah. So they could have done that. But I think I think the film is getting a lot of people. A lot of people didn't like the film. The film wasn't as well received as other films from MCU. But I think I understood what Chloe was trying to do. I feel like she was trying to pick up a superhero movie, making it diverse, having different characters, having people that look more like us, like normal people, a bit less of a superhero muscle thing, but more a mental thing, a more intelligent film. And I think she succeeded on that sense. The film is very smart at some moments. She's trying to bring Marvel to a more diverse cast and also to a more, a fresher point where we don't have just muscle people running around destroying buildings. It's like but it's funny because then the film, because it was trying so hard to do that, and like you said, it had too many plot stories, it then starts to be a bit like Justice League, where you have too much. Justice League had exactly the same problem. They didn't build the origin stories, and then they suffered from it because they didn't build it. They're now building them now, but it's a bit too late now to go back,
I'm not sure if there was ever a plan or would be a plan
Probably
for
not.
just an Angelina Jolie Thenna story. Yes. One of the other challenges was I like the groundedness of it because, they did their thing trying to get rid of the deviants for thousands of years, and then they sort of go back into society.
Yeah.
That felt very grounded. But of course, it was hugely contrasted with suddenly the celestial side of the film and the final sequence. So, of course, those things were going to happen because that's the beings they are. but I felt like I just want to go back to the groundedness of Camden in London, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that was a challenge.
Yeah,
To sort of
I know what you
enjoy.
mean. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like the film also has some funny moments. You know, the I love like the section where Kamal he's trying to do a Bollywood film about the Eternals. I love that section. That entire section is quite funny, and you're right, it becomes really grounded because it's just when, you know, he's doing this dynasty of actors that is like he's pretending that he's always the same person, like there's always like a family of actors of Bollywood, like three generations of Bollywood. He's always the same guy.
I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, that was a really fun moment.
Did you feel like
I want to
there was
see that
more
film?
to that?
I want to see that film. You know?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I felt there was like more to that, and because it was just getting too long, perhaps they had to cut some stuff out. There's
Maybe.
a really funny bit where I think he's going to leave and all his acting troupe enter the tent, and including one of them dressed in a stuffy, you know, like a blue, like a creature stuffy, you know, which is one of my things that I'm obsessed with.
It's so funny because no, definitely that section was. You can definitely feel they were really having fun with that, and also like even the I can't remember the main actress, like the character. I blurred on their names, but Cersei, that's right.
Yep.
There's even a moment she's at the museum and she looks at the Darwin's statue and says hello to him because she met Darwin, you know. So it's so funny because she met all these people on this museum and she actually had relationship with them, and they had relationship with the Knights of the Round Table, and I want to see those stories. I thought that was the film has this scale. It has this level of scale, which is really interesting. You know,
you felt like that could be a great streaming series, didn't you? Their adventures since 5000 BC.
Imagine that, because it was always a bit rushed. It was always that is the issue. Like the film, and still the film is like 3 hours long, and it tried really hard not to be 4 or 5 hours, because probably it would have to be that 4 or 5 hours. But yeah, I think that's my feeling about the film. I feel the film has this kind of freshness to it, but there's some moments which are a bit weird. Like, you know, although if you've watched the film, like the thing with Thanos, you know, why didn't they help in Thanos, those kind of things. Although it is explained at the end, I don't want to spoil. I hope everyone has watched the film before they watch this podcast. But it's obviously that they wouldn't be affected by the snap. So yeah, I think it's like you said, it's too many characters, too many things. You know, but fresh, you know. So I think everyone should go and see it. And I definitely know what Chloe was trying to do. And I think that it's good that we have this. I feel like we shouldn't have always the same thing. We shouldn't have always, you know, the Avengers and the always the same way. It's good that the MCU tries to diversify and tries to do different things, because otherwise we're never going to evolve and it's going to be very tiring. So I hope they follow up. I hope there's an Eternals 2, and I hope they follow up with these stories, and they don't really get bogged down by the fact that the film didn't get a lot of critical acclaim. The film still did really well, so I think they won't worry about that. I think the film did well.
I'm sure they're working on the sequel. Don't worry. Yeah. Don't you worry about that, Hugo.
Yeah, I get a bit worried because I think this film for me is the fresh film, just like the same way that Doctor Strange was a bit fresh as well. I really enjoyed Doctor Strange because it was so different from the other films, and it was so whimsical and so mystical, and the supreme being. Every time the MCU tries to do something a bit different and tries to do something it's so cosmical, that's the part I love. I love that on the Marvel comics, in the original Marvel comics, because it has that like universe feeling to it, where there's so much other things happening than just the little stuff in Earth, you know. And I love that. But those films are always a bit tighter received, because I think people are just used to the other ones. They're just used to the Avengers big ensemble, you know.
Yeah. But you mentioned doing something different, and part of that was bringing the director Chloé Zhao onto the film.
Yeah.
Now, Chloé could be described as an indie director. The film that she made before this was Nomadland.
Yeah.
Hugely successful film, but a small film.
Yeah. Won the Oscar for best movie, but yeah.
And so I love the idea that you would bring a director who had more of a small idea or small sensibility to the huge MCU. You can argue it didn't work here as well as we want it to work.
Yeah.
But you could also argue that this is what the director and Marvel are trying to do, as you say, do something different. What do you think is an example, Hugo, of other times this has been done in the MCU or perhaps in other franchises or elsewhere?
So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, she's coming from the Oscar, and before I even go into that, like, just wanted to little mention, we don't know much what happened. There's not a lot out, and we don't know exactly how this was done. I'm assuming that I'm just making assumptions, of course, so please forgive me if I'm saying something wrong, but I feel that you can really feel that her indie sensibilities are in the film, but sometimes there are sections of the film that don't have any indie sensibilities, and I feel that might be because the MCU film still has to have some MCU parts, and there might have been, not a fight, but I'm sure there was like a bit of a little clash there, because of course the MCU has a very determined universe that it has to follow, and obviously the executive producers and the producers have something that they really want to make, and I'm sure Chloe didn't do exactly what she wanted to do on the film, because there is that balance that you have to make for it to fit on the rest of the MCU, but they want to have the freshness of it. So, and I think that's the issue. And there's a lot of examples where this happened over the careers of independent directors. I have a big list here. I don't want to go through them all, but we recently talked about that on a podcast, on our episode with David Lynch. Where they brought in practically an unknown independent director just with 2 films on his belt. He only did Elephant Man and Eraserhead, and then he did Dune, which was an absolute colossal failure. It didn't really work back then, although we love the film, but it didn't really work. So that's an example of something that didn't work at all. But there's some other examples that work really well. Like if you look, for example, at Gareth Edwards, for example. He comes from this kind of like $500,000 film called Monsters, and then he still manages to do Godzilla, which was really interesting. And then Rogue One, which in my view is the best Star Wars movie that came out of all these new movies. It feels amazing. It feels like a Star Wars movie. I think he did an amazing job with Rogue One. You also have examples like, Matt Reeves as well, coming from really small indie and then blowing us all away with Cloverfield and with Planet of the Apes and now Batman, which we haven't watched yet, but it looks phenomenal. And I think the most amazing example of this happening is Paul Greengrass, where he's doing The Bourne Supremacy, and it basically changes action movies forever, So I think there are so many examples. Then you have Sam Raimi with Evil Dead, and then it suddenly he revolutionizes the summer blockbuster with Spider-Man. You have Peter Jackson with Bad Taste, like one of the worst films in the world, and then he goes to Lord of the Rings. And I think there is definitely something here where an indie director can really bring this layer of freshness to a tired franchise or to a tired IP, because he's bringing a completely different view on it. And I'm sure Chloe doesn't look like a person that would be very into Marvel. She doesn't really look like a person that is very into action films, watching her other films, And I think that freshness is awesome. I mean, there's so many other examples, but I don't want to spend like 20 minutes now giving examples. But I feel majority of the time it works. There's, of course, examples where it didn't work, like Zhang Zhenou with Amélie and Delicatessen, and then he goes to Alien Resurrection, which that was a bit of a disaster. It didn't really work out well. David Lynch didn't work out well. But I think there are more examples that worked than it didn't, and there's others. You have Mark Foster, you have James Gunn, there's so many. And even the Wachowski sisters, brothers, sisters. They used to be brothers when they did The Matrix, but now they're sisters. Coming from Bond, which is like a really amazing independent movie, and then suddenly the Matrix franchise, which also revolutionizes everything, really, in the 90s. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, if I have to say one thing, though, on this thing, Chloe for me is really pivotal as well, because you saw my list. I don't know if you noticed, but there's definitely a representation issue here because it's only men. There's not a single woman on this list, and I didn't do it in purpose. It's just that it's very hard to find, and I'm really happy that Chloe is there because I feel like there's definitely a representation issue in Hollywood and blockbusters and films. There's so few female directors doing these films, and I would love to see more, because I think even though Eternals maybe didn't work out exactly as it should, I think at some point it will. If they keep doing it, this freshness will change and make better films, for sure.
No, I mean, I don't want to disagree with you, Hugo, except to say that there's another perspective on this, which is that these indie directors, which we keep classing as indie directors, their aspirations may not just be to make indie films.
Yes.
I mean, you can sort of tell that someone like Denis Villeneuve, who's made lots and lots of films, started out as doing indie stuff, but seems to have wanted to do huge sci-fi films like Blade Runner and Dune, for example. And there are some of the directors that have been called upon to do Star Wars films and occasionally been taken off those films, or the films didn't happen. I think it's their aspiration to be filmmakers of some kind, and this is a project that comes their way. I don't think you're wrong about big studios wanting to take advantage of an independent or certain sensibility that some filmmaker has shown in their film.
It gives gravitas. It gives gravitas. Now they can say, they have an Oscar-winning director directing a Marvel film. So they've had that before.
I don't know, but they also just like that director's style or whatever it is.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I think you're right. There's probably other franchises where they kind of know that an established director can take it on. Mm-hmm. I mean, some people might have thought Kenneth Branagh was an unusual choice for Thor because of his Shakespearean chops, but that's kind of Thor, isn't it? And he knew how to make a film.
And it worked for the first one. Unfortunately, it didn't work for the second one. That's the thing, because he didn't do the second one. That's I think the issue as well. No, but there's no disrespect. I don't think you're absolutely right. Some of these directors want to do those films, but you know how it is. Like there's always this kind of like debate where, if I'm going to do a Marvel film, I'm going to sell out or something like that. There's this kind of romantic notion, which I think is silly. It's completely silly. A film is a film. And I feel like this is great. I want more of these directors to do as many blockbusters as possible, because I feel that sometimes the issues we have with certain of these films, like with some tiredness that we have on certain blockbuster films and certain, DC films, even some Marvel films, they come from not respecting the source material and not bringing a fresh view to it, and being too much involved on their own event without really looking outside. And I think this film, she's looking outside, and it worked. It worked for, I don't know, 60%, 70% of it. Didn't work for some parts, but I think this is good. And
Also, mate, we keep saying indie and the sensibilities of those filmmakers, but I guess what do we mean by that? Part of at least the marketing appeal for Eternals that Disney talked about or Marvel talked about was going out and shooting on real locations and moving the camera and staging scenes in certain ways. I feel like that did happen, and it does feel a bit more naturalistic. It doesn't mean that not every shot is a visual effects shot, because that's just how these comic book movies work, right? But I think, even if they're restaging scenes or doing reshoots or making the scenes bigger than what they were just from the plate shoot, they're at least using what could be said to be Chloe's sensibilities for those sequences. And it is apparent. You can tell the difference between this film and other MCU ones, I think.
Yeah, it's much more naturalistic. It's also like the way that she uses, not just her, but the DOP as well, of course, but the way the film is shot and the way the film, it has a much more contemplative moment. It has much less cuts, very wide lenses. Yeah. You're basically a spectator looking at these almost like theatrical moments. It doesn't have as many cuts as a normal Marvel movie has, and definitely a lot of locations. The film, you can feel the freshness. Although there's a problem with that, though. Like, I feel like the film sometimes looks a bit uninspired, because when you depend too much on the real locations, obviously, you depend on the sun and you depend on the clouds and you depend on the look that it has at the moment. And so sometimes the movie looks a bit flat and it looks doesn't look as good as other films that look more stylized. And I think it's because of that, because normally on a more low budget indie film, like, they just shoot it when they can and they shoot it when they have it, and if it's sunny that day, it's sunny that day. If it's cloudy that day, it's cloudy that day. I'm not saying that happened here, but sometimes the film looked a bit flat to me. I think the film could have looked a bit better, but I think that was in purpose. I think it was to make it more grounded. It became more realistic from it. It became a bit, but it's a bit of a conflict, because it looks more realistic because of that, but then it has like the big VFX shots, and it just doesn't fit very well sometimes. There's a bit of a conflict there. So that's why it sometimes might look a bit too generic, but it's not. It's just that it's shot in a very different way. Yeah.
Well, the only thing I would say is that I believe the cinematographer Ben Davis has done a bunch of Marvel films, so they're not sort of newbie there. Also, This was filmed clearly during the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
And I imagine that brought a lot of complications just about crew and locations and shutting down and switching between filming in London and perhaps any other shoots in Los Angeles and elsewhere. Hugo, how these films get made normally astounds me. How they get made during a pandemic, I just still don't understand. But so congratulations, frankly, to everyone who actually made this possible. But I imagine that just impacted things, just planning, and it probably impacted visual effects clearly as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, the indie thing is interesting, because we did applaud when Thor went in a different direction with Taika, and we do applaud, even maybe some of the streaming shows, which are, I'm not sure we could say they're indie directors, but they're showrunners or people who take something in a direction that maybe wouldn't have been done in a movie, like the Loki series. I'm sure it's still under the auspices of Kevin Feige and his team. But, I'm the first to admit, I felt like some of the Marvel films, which I am the first in line to watch, had got very similar, but only in that, as I said before, they basically finish with a huge chase or climactic sequence. And I was just feeling like they're a bit samey. So any kind of introduction of a new director or new approach is very welcome.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and I'm going to say this film, unfortunately, it just still feels like it had that kind of ending, even though the ending was actually quite different.
Yeah. I feel the same, and that's the thing, when we first talked about this film, my first reaction was like, I didn't really like it that much, and it was terrible. But I've watched it again, and then also, like, I've thought about more and more about it, and some images linger in my head, and some of it stayed with me, which I cannot say about some Marvel movies. I don't think some of them don't stay with me. So there's something different here, and I think it's grown on me. Like, I'm liking the movie more now than I did when I first watched it, and I think it has to do with the fact that it has some really clever stuff there that unfortunately doesn't really go deep. You've already mentioned this. This would have been a brilliant TV show. It would. 6-8 episodes about their time on Earth for millions of years. It would have been awesome. Would have been amazing,
There's a lot of mystery.
They would have had a lot of time to go to. And I just wanted an entire episode about Druid. It would have been awesome for him to see what he's been up to for 700 years controlling people, man. We see him on the film. He's like on this village and everyone is controlled by him. It's like, what the hell? It's like a dictator / messiahs thing. It's great. I love that part of the story. And yeah, but anyway.
There was a particular bit in the film that I felt needed more explanation and could have done that, I suppose, as a streaming. And it was, what's the condition that Angelina Jolie's character suffers from?
Oh, the fractal mind thing. I can't remember the name, but yeah, I know what you mean. She was supposedly, her mind was fractured by the thousands of years of memories, which makes perfect sense. Imagine you remembering everything for like 1,000 years.
I like that.
Yeah.
But I felt like there was a missing part of that which didn't get explained somewhere and kind of got mentioned when they were not in... There was some point there was a big... where Dewey does take control of them for a second.
Yeah.
And then she gets that condition. Yeah. And it was sort of a bit exposition-y. Meaning it felt like there was another point where they had dealt with it in a bigger way. But anyway.
She was a bit of... she's a bit wasted, I think, on the film. Like, I wish that they could have showed more of that character. And also, like, it's Angelina Jolie, and she doesn't show much on the film. I think that's the thing. They don't have enough time to go through the whole thing.
Yeah. Oh, it's the mad weary
yes, exactly,
condition.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, you can't remember all these names. There's so many things on this film.
We're not going to go through every single visual effect sequence because it's a huge film as usual. So maybe let's pinpoint a few things, Hugo, that we thought were standouts. I mean, from an overall point of view, in all the marketing and the trailers and then in the final film, I really did like the different look of the deviants. These beasts, these creatures which were so spindly and tendrily and complicated looking. I enjoyed seeing their different incarnations on the film. When Crow became more human-like, I struggled a little bit because I was kind of like, I didn't kind of get that transition, and I feel like I want to watch it again to try and understand it a bit more. But when they were creatures,
it gives you that 90s CG vibe, doesn't it? The weird humanoid, alien, almost like... I didn't like it at all. Like, that transformation was not... I didn't like the direction of it, for sure.
Yeah, not the actual transformation, but just...
At the end, when he became a humanoid. Yeah. It's just weird. It didn't look as good as the rest. I know what you mean.
Right. In general, the creature work, I really enjoyed the complexity of it.
Yeah.
And this is work that was led by ILM, but Weta Digital and Scanline also had deviant shots. What did you think about that complex character type look?
Yeah, so for my personal taste, I didn't really like the direction that it went. As I understood from the interview that you published on the before and afters with VFX Soup with
Stephanie Soretti.
Yeah, so as I read on your interview on befores and afters, they had a lot of design iterations, and so they probably had a lot of different looks. You wanted something really different. I can't not look at this, and they mentioned this on the interview. I always remember Princess Mononoke from Ghibli, about the type of, like, at the beginning of the film on Mononoke, you have this monster, this black goo monster that shows up on the beginning of the forest. Reminds me of that, and I wish they went with a more gooey black form. It would have been more scary. It would have looked nastier as well. I think the purpley and the color, it was just too much color, too much purple. They look a bit funny. They looked a bit weird. They didn't look scary. I didn't felt that they were scary. I felt they look a bit strange. It didn't really work for me, Ian. I thought that the direction didn't work for me. But they look astounding, of course. They look amazing.
Yeah.
They look for real, and there's no question the work is stellar, so.
Where they worked best for me, I generally like them, was in the forest sequence. This
Yeah.
is the Druid camp in Amazon. And you kind of got to see them, I felt, a bit more close quarters because they would be in like really close fights with Icarus. And, you know, there's even that point where they're pinning him down and it's kind of like a ode to the Revenant bear sequence.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
and
even
to
Chloe
Superman
mentioned
as
that.
well. Yeah, for
Yeah.
both. It's like mixing two scenes, the Revenant and the Superman image at the end, you know, Man of Steel as well. That is a fascinating shot. It's a beautiful shot. It lingers quite a long time as well. It's like a 20-second shot. It's that's a great shot. But I know what you mean. You see their personalities, right? That's what you mean, right? Because you see the different deviants. There's a lot of them. They have different personalities and different little structures, and they do different things. That's really cool, yeah.
And possibly also, maybe just the way that scene was shot, they seem to interact a lot more with the dirt and trees, and they're blowing up huts and actually interacting more with the characters. It almost feels a bit more classic visual effects, you know, that the interaction is really important. In many other scenes, they possibly feel a bit more just added to the scene, you know, which is what, of course, they are. I just thought the Amazon sequence was heightened to a really intricate level, you know, where you saw them in a much more detailed way. I'm not sure why I actually feel that way, but it might be more because you're inside the forest, it's dappled light, that, you know, there's just something about this scene that's a bit more at stake because you're also a bit on edge about what's Druig doing, and you feel like you know a bit more about Icarus by now as well. So I don't know, it might be a story point, a part in the story that
It is. I think
that?
the feeling you're mentioning is because they are the stars of that sequence. You know, they are the main characters of the sequence, not the Eternals anymore. And that's because, you know, their ass is ended to them. They get really beat up on that entire sequence. This is the moment on the film that you see, wow, these guys are actually dangerous. Because when you start the film, they're just killed, you know, like nothing. It's like they're nothing.
Right.
It's so easy to destroy them. You know, it's even looks silly, you know, like they come in, they wipe it out, and there's not even a moment of despair. There's like just a little shoulder thing that Icarus has, but that's it, and gets healed right away. On this one, you feel like they're gonna die, you know, because they're so powerful and they really have the advantage on this seat. I think that was that's one of the freshness things about Chloe's direction, I think, because they look scary on that moment, and that's why you're feeling like that, because they are in charge. And that's when you find out that they have their powers and they can recover and they can regenerate and they can swap the power, like they can actually get the powers from the Eternals. So if they kill them, they get that power as well. Then you start to be worried about this, you know. And it's beautiful also shot, isn't it? Because it's actually in location. You have all these trees. It must have been a nightmare to track and to roto and to comp, and also with the wire work and at all. There's so much wire work on this film for them to jump and to fly and to get pushed around, and also destructions of buildings, of course with CG augmentation, but there's a lot of set destruction there as well, and tree destructions. It's a very, very seamless sequence. Looks very good. Yeah.
A shout out, as we always do, to the digi-double work, I think, in a sequence like that.
Yeah.
And throughout the film. I think it's sort of like the hidden, not to visual effects people, but it's the hidden thing to the audience, where luckily we get so many scenes with Icarus and Gemma Chan, and like, so we know that these are real actors playing these characters. But in so many of the flying and battle sequences, you know, they're augmented with their digi-double versions or up close photoreal versions.
Yeah.
Or possibly face replacement for some stunts. But I thought that work here was really fantastic.
Yeah, it was, definitely. It's the highlight of the show for sure. One of them.
Yeah.
There's a few, but yeah.
There's another kind of visual effect, Hugo, I wanted to talk to you about, which is more the celestial cosmic stuff. And that can be broken up a bit into when Cersei learns about the real nature of the cosmos, I suppose, and meets these massive robots and is transported into these massive, worlds, I suppose, celestial worlds. What's your general take on that sort of work in the film?
My God, like that is like that's my favorite part of the film. I love the forest as well, but for me, my favorite shot of the film, that's what lingered in my head, was the big moment when you see how big Adisham is. I know if I'm pronouncing it wrong. I think it's Adisham.
Yep.
He's huge. He's the size of a planet. And you see this little speck of a person in front of him, and then you see his eyes with the 6 eyes thing and the big head. And you look at that and like, wow, okay. He's so huge. That is the moment for me for the film. Like, that's the moment. Like, that's the moment that lingers. It shows up a few times. Then you see the story and backstory of them, that you have to almost hatch these characters inside the world. And they're so massive, and you need to kill all these trillions of people to get one to live. And that sense of scale was really amazing. I felt the sound, the voice, the sound effects, the distortion voice, the scale of it, the slow pace of it. It was just beautiful. And of course, it's all lies. He's explaining all the cosmical things to her, but it's all a lie. They're going to learn later on. There's also some beautiful moments inside that big environment where they're looking at the memories and looking at all that kind of construction, 3D printing facility where they can print not print, but like construct kind of like, really, it's kind of like 3D printing. They can construct the Eternals from there. Yeah, that moment is what reminds me of the Marvel. When I was a kid, when I was reading Marvel comics, and I used to read, like the Silver Surfer and the cosmical stuff and Doctor Strange, that's what reminds me of that. It's a Jack Kirby thing right on there, of course, Eternals was made by Jack Kirby, but that is a Jack Kirby frame, there. All those sequences look like out of the comic book pages. Yeah, it's stunning. I think those sections are stunning. Full CG, of course. There's not much, if anyone, there's not much footage there on those sequences. Yeah,
it's pretty great to see that at the cinema. I really enjoyed those vast shots. I'm gonna admit that I was a bit confused. That's not really related to the visual effects, but I think, as I've mentioned, I want to see it again to try and get more of a sense of that. The challenge that I've always had is when those kind of scenes happen and you've been watching some nice grounded stuff on Earth, I do switch off a bit. And the most successful visual effects that tend to be set in outer space, they kind of can still ground you. Like, I guess I love what they did in Guardians of the Galaxy. Which is not the same sort of mystical stuff, because it is actually on planets and worlds, right?
Yeah.
And this is sort of something else. So I didn't react to it as being the most amazing thing in the film, but I thought the work looked incredible, and I thought they could go anywhere with it, and clearly, just even making design choices here would have been a mammoth task.
I maybe you misunderstood me. I didn't mean to say that this was my favorite part of the movie. My favorite part of the movie is that frame that Adishman is there, like with his head and the small person. Not talking about that sequence. That sequence is very stylized and it's very cartoonish almost. So I think it has some issues. I'm talking about him, the character.
Sure.
Especially at the end when he shows up and you see it in London in the garden, and then he shows up and all the clouds goes away, and then he shows up in the earth there and you see his big head. Those are like the two moments that, my God, this thing is big, and it's just the scale of it and the sound effects and the music, and also the music is really beautiful, by the way, the soundtrack, and also the voice, the deep voice that he has. That's what I meant. That's my favorite scene. The space entire sequence is very beautiful, but it's not. You're right. I think it's too much exposition, and you lose yourself. It's so much stuff going on there. So much stuff.
Let me say something controversial here, Hugo. And I'm happy for anyone who worked on the film or people who work on these huge films to say, Ian, you are such an idiot. I felt like some of those scenes in the celestial stuff, the scenes at the end of the film, the beach battle and the, more the island ocean battle stuff, and that final view of Arishem looking down at London, I personally felt that there must have been some amazing concept art done for these, right? Now, I think you know where I'm going. These scenes just looked awesome as pitch documents, concept frames, as they always do in Marvel films. And I just wonder, with a film that needed to have such great scale, I just wonder whether that was a big, big challenge for the VFX teams to pull off. To A, be realistic, and B, just to be more than concept frames, right? Which is what they have to be. And it's a challenge in any super powered comic book setup, because you've got to always try and make it grounded. But those particular moments in the film, I'm like, I guarantee you there is some killer concept art that has been translated beautifully to the film, but it was the concept art that sold those scenes, not something else.
Yeah,
do you know what I'm getting at?
I know exactly what you mean. Like, as usual, concept art on most films look always better than the film itself at the end. That's always the common thing. And we've talked about this, I think, once already. Maybe not. I can't remember. It all merges in my head. But I feel like the issue with that is because when you do concept art, you have one artist. There's one painter, a very artistic-driven painter doing this beautiful matte painting, this beautiful concept art, like working with the director. I've been on that position many times, working with two people working, just bouncing ideas, two people, brainstorming ideas, and then this beautiful frame comes out of that conversation between two people with no limitations. It's like, okay, let's not think about how we're going to shoot it. Let's just do the beautiful image. And then we'll talk about how we can film it. And normally, that is the most pure moment of these kind of films, where you have this beautiful image that will never be possible to achieve again because of budget constraints, issues with how to make the effect, the scale, the sense of groundness. It's so difficult. And I understand your point of view. It looks a bit weird to see that big head on the sky, and then the sky goes away and then he shows up. But I felt that they were incredibly powerful, the images. Yes, they looked a bit fake and they looked a bit weird. There's something strange about them, but that's what I've really liked on them, because they look like something I've never seen before. I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen anything like that.
I like them too.
Yeah.
But I could just sort of see the progression in my head. That's all.
I know what you mean. I know. I can already see them. Like, forgive me, I don't know the concept artist's name. I'm sure when the book Art of comes out, we'll know what his name is. But I'm sure this person with Chloe, they had a blast. They had a blast doing this, I'm sure. And then they came into the team and then they said, okay, this is what we're doing. And then everyone just like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Because one of the most difficult things in the world to make is scale. It's so difficult in CG. It's difficult to make scale in CG because you need so much. You need the fog and you need like atmosphere. You need all these things to make scale. And he's in space. So there's no atmosphere in space. There's no fog in space. There's nowhere to hide. How do you make scale in space? You don't. It's very difficult. And they tried. They put the person really tiny, and it helps, but it still doesn't give the scale of it, because this guy, this being, Arishem, like, he's like what? The size of half Earth, it's like maybe bigger than the Earth. He's huge. Like, it's how do you even do that? How do you even show that? It's really difficult.
Yeah,
really,
I
really
agree.
difficult. It's a bit easier on Earth when they're on the ocean fight sequence because you see the little fingers coming out of the Earth and the water. It's a bit easier because they can put atmospheres and they can put fog and they can put depth of field. They can put distance to those hands and make the scale work a bit better. It's very difficult to work outside.
Yeah, that's true. Except that the way that they play that sequence is that that thing is only emerging very slowly. And so it's not a huge battle against that thing or a big fight.
Yeah.
And so in some ways, I think they struggled with the scale. They seem to put the camera down into the ocean and a lot lower, and that worked well. I have actually, I've of course done a few interviews with the VFX team, and the amount of work on this film is insane and incredible. And another thing that I think non-visual effects people don't always know is how much, visual development gets done at Marvel level and director level and production designer, art director. But here in particular on this film, I think the visual effects teams and their art departments and their art directors, even if they don't have them formally, the contributions they made on this film are pretty incredible. Because clearly on Marvel films, the VFX team gets asked, have a go at this. and there's a lot of iterations. But I think that happens more on these Marvel films than perhaps other ones. And it certainly happened here. But sorry, yes, that final sequence, I actually liked that it looked a bit more art-driven than...
Yeah. It looked like a page of the Jack Kirby's comic book. It looked literally like a page from there. I liked that, but it's again, I'm conflicted. That scene haunted me, but then I don't know. Like I wanted to see other things. There's so many other more interesting moments in history.
Right.
Where are they on the Second World War? Where are they on Napoleon's War? Where are they on the like the Black Plague? All those moments that I wanted to see. It's like they picked the most boring moments to show. I don't know. Like I felt like there was other moments that I wanted to watch, but
I suppose if they showed too many battles, you would then say there's too many huge
Never mind. That's just
confrontations.
my problem. I had some issues with the film on some moments, but yeah, no, I absolutely think. But it's funny because you see, even on the visual effects, Ian, the film has a bit of a different balance going on. Like, yes, the ending and that spatial thing is very whimsical, very mystical, very artistic, and very stylized. But then look at the Camden sequence. That's like just an absolutely boots on the ground, visual effects, photoreal moment, which very grounded, super grounded, completely different from that ending. I even the visual effects kind of go in a different direction throughout the film, I feel. And that sequence is also very interesting, isn't it, to talk about?
The Camden one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's two major things happening there. There's a lot of creature work with the Deviant, and the bus, I could say, is creature work as well. This was handled by Scanline. And then Sprite also does the duplication thing.
Yeah.
And I think I liked that effect the most in the Camden
awesome.
Moments,
Yeah.
right? Because I
It's
felt
awesome.
like that was more, this is interesting. This is like a fun use of motion control and a fun use of, twinning stuff in visual effects. But yeah, no, I actually did like that Camden stuff. For people who live in London, they probably recognise that a lot more than I would. But,
that's a really famous bridge. The bridge where they're fighting, that's super famous. I've never seen it so empty, though.
Right.
It's always packed with people in a lot of bars and a lot of restaurants having food there. I guess maybe this was too late for that to be open.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sequence is really cool. With obviously on the bridge, she multiplies everyone and she just replicates everyone on the bridge so the deviants get confused. all achieved with motion control and a lot of green screen B-roll. There's also a lot of digital humans there. The background people were all digital humans, so they didn't have to do. Otherwise, they would have filmed, I don't know, 50 passes on the motion control. It would have taken too long. So yeah, it's a really clever sequence, and again, a bit fresh as well. I don't think we've seen anything like this on the MCU before. Very, very fresh moment there. I love that part. I really like the bus becoming pedals. I love that sequence because it's so unexpected, and I feel it's a shame that we saw what she could do before. I wish that was the first moment we saw what she could do, because she does that thing on the earthquake where she touches the fossil and the fossil becomes dust. And imagine if you were, as a spectator, didn't know what she did. Cersei, we never knew what she did. And then suddenly she touches a bus and the bus becomes pedals. And it's like, what is going on? It would have been so much cooler, but we already knew that she could do that with organic things. Sorry, non-organic things. She can only convert with non-organic. Beautiful sequence. Again, really well filmed. There's a lot of parts on that section. You have, of course, the pedals moment where they had some pedals on set to help out. And then, of course, they did a huge particle system of pedals. But also, like, there's an entire replica CG street of Camden that they made where they filmed the bus driver, which they actually mentioned it's an actual bus driver. It's the actual bus driver from the bus that they've cast. And he's shooting it on a green screen, and then they did a full CG set of Camden so they could have the actual crash against the Deviant. So there's like a lot of groundness, yes, because it's a real set, but also they actually scanned the whole thing and did the whole thing in full CG as well for certain shots and certain moments. And it's seamless. You don't even notice between them which one is what. You know, you don't even notice, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, I thought that was awesome. You know, the trouble with that sequence is that clearly someone loved it from a marketing point of view, and it was a part of the trailer and released as a clip. And we kind of, like you say, I guess if you don't watch any of that stuff, it is a huge surprise. But you kind of wanted Cersei to do that all throughout the whole film. I think what they were playing at was that she wasn't aware of her own powers.
Yeah.
You know, or how powerful they were. Because later on in the forest sequence, she makes that metal tree. Oh, I'm not even sure what she does from the fountain from the pond.
Yeah, merges the Deviant onto a tree. But you see, that is the thing. I wish the film started with the Camden sequence, because if you didn't know anyone, if you didn't know what they did before, because that first fight sequence on the beginning really shows too much. Like, you're already seeing all of the Eternals, what they're doing. Imagine if you start the film as a regular film with London, you go to Camden, and then she converts the bus to a pedal, and then a guy flies out of a shop and starts putting lasers out of his eyes. What is going on? Who are these people? I think that's what I think could have worked. And they could have went back to that fight sequence later on. They could have put it as a flashback like they did multiple times with Babylon and other sequences. I felt that the surprise would have been a nicer way to do the film and not start with the fight sequence, which is too complex and too overpowered as well. They're so overpowered. They destroy the villains right away. Would have been nice to have it as a flashback. But again, I just feel like the film has this issue. It has this, the film doesn't hit on all cylinders all the time, and there's like certain things that could have been more interesting, I think. They could have, because there's some brilliant moments. That Camden sequence is really nice, and it's a shame that it's not utilized to its full potential, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that they were almost hamstrung by what they could do with this film, which is, seeing as it was a thing where they came at 5000 BC, it's ripe for flashbacks.
Yeah.
And that always is tricky from a writing, filmmaking point of view, because how much do you want to just jump to one flashback, come back to present day, use it to hold back some information from the audience? I mean, it's possible they were trying to do too many things, Hugo. One of the things, for example, is they were really trying to tell this love story, or unrequited love, perhaps, between Cersei and Icarus, right?
Yeah.
And a tricky thing to do, to thread that between all the different sequences.
Yeah, and I know what you mean, because for that love story, you would have to show the beginning where they're constructed, and then they look at Earth, and then they talk to each other. Oh, it's beautiful, isn't it? I understand, but I still think that could have happened later. We could have seen them being constructed later on, because we kind of like do it twice anyway, because we see the fake why they are constructed, and then we see why they were actually constructed. So I feel like I'm just like, on a perfect world, I would have done that. I would have shown that sequence, because I think that pedal moment, and you're right, like it was ruined by marketing. It was ruined by trailers. It's like so much out there. There's even behind the scenes, there's even breakdowns. They really pushed that sequence.
Yeah, well, it's such a good one. Now, I think just to finish up, Hugo, we still haven't talked about the most important visual effects in the film. Now, everyone knows when I put that voice on, I'm being sarcastic, but I still thought it was a funny moment. This is when they're in Australia, and I don't want to talk too much about that, but Gilgamesh, at some point, what actually happens here? A baby suit, baby clothing is conjured onto him, isn't it? Sorry, I had to bring it up.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm just laughing because it's such a silly scene. It's such a strange scene right away. I can't even remember how they get there. I can't even remember that. The film is so, there's so much going on in the film. I can't really remember how they got there.
Yeah. Okay. Let's quickly talk about that. That was one thing. This happens in all films. They've been apart for 1,000 years, or I don't know, however long. They haven't been able to get in touch with each other, and suddenly they're able to go and find each other. I might have missed some of the way that they were doing that.
I guess they had a phone call. They had a phone number. I don't know.
He's in some deserted place.
Apparently, one of them was living in the ship all this time. Like, what? How did she get in? Because we saw the ship coming out of the dirt. And how did she... I guess the more we think about the film, it's better that we don't think about the film. But yeah, that baby moment is so funny. It's so funny. That actor is... I can't remember his name, but he's so funny as well on the whole film. But that is...
Don Lee. Yeah. I did read a really quick interview, which was either with Kevin or with Chloe, or it might have been with Steph Soretti, where... You know, the person from the publication said, "Oh, what was that like having the baby costume on set?" And of course, it's a completely CG costume, which is so not unusual for Marvel, right? So that was kind of good that it fooled, one of these trade publications.
It's so funny, isn't it? Imagine like they're like asking the actor that. Like, that's so funny. Like, how did you feel? I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't even see that. I was never dressed on anything. It's so funny. Maybe, I mean, I doubt, like, yeah, I guess. I guess you have to wonder, why would they actually do it in CG? That's the other thing. But I guess there was a reason for it. Maybe it happened later, or I don't know.
I think that's a really obvious reason, and it's that they don't always have time to manufacture these costumes. They're quite elaborate. Right.
You're probably
right. The story keeps changing. Yeah. It gives them a lot of flexibility. They're confident in the ability of VFX vendors to do it.
Yeah.
And, maybe it was something else before it was the baby costume. And this is the one that got the biggest laughs, right?
Yeah. So then they picked that. Yeah, but there are some really funny moments on the film for sure. Like, I know you want to wrap up, but there is like that moment is really funny. There's of course the interaction with him on the family with the IKEA table being broken, which is also really funny. When thinking that the table is, but for me, like we already talked about the Indian Bollywood section, but I really love the valet, which is called Karun. He's played by Adish Patel. He's so funny. He's always filming with cameras and different cameras, and it's just a lavitas on the film, isn't it? Like he's like shooting this documentary with different. How many cameras do you have? He just keeps putting another camera, another camera. He just keeps filming all of this. And I love that section, and I kind of feel like I would wish that they would have released like a B-roll version of the film by those camera footage. Would have been so cool to release on YouTube, like a 7-minute long, just those sequences if they would have rolled for real on the set, would have been so cool. I think they've missed an opportunity there. They missed the little trick there for sure.
And of course, what he did was levity, but also sometimes the Eternals asked him questions, and he answered in a very honest way.
He's the spectator. He's the guy. He's the guy. He doesn't know what's going on, but he's like the human, and he's so grateful. Oh, thank you so much because you guys have saved us so many times.
Yeah. That was a really inspired character, a really inspired moment, and part of that's part of something a bit different of this film that I really liked, actually. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I think both him, Adish Patel, the actor that does Karun, and also, of course, Kamal, they are both fantastic on this film. They're fantastic. I love him from Silicon Valley. I love him from that TV show. And I hope he does more and more and more now, because he's amazing. He was already amazing on that show, but I think he's also really buff on this film. It's really super funny to say he's super buff. And, he's so muscular. He was not like that at all on he's actually, it's so funny because it's almost like he's the actually opposite of the character he was playing on Silicon Valley. It's so funny. I was always waiting for the moment that the other guy, his friend from Silicon Valley, would show up on the film joking with him or something like that. Would have been so cool.
Yeah, no, he was great. I loved it. Well, Hugo, I think we've done Eternals proud.
I think so. There's a lot more,
but we've also missed so much of it. But I think we just have to.
People have to go and watch it. I think people should give it a chance, and if they haven't watched it, they should. And if they watched it, they should go in again. I like this freshness, so give it a chance, guys. Go and see it, guys and girls. Go and see it again.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for watching. And Hugo, we always make sure we give a shout out to where people can find us on social media. Where's the best place?
Yeah, so if you guys want to follow up, like Hugo's Desk on YouTube, Hugo's Desk on Twitter. I also have Hugo Sigara on Twitter as well. And as we mentioned in the beginning, if you guys love the show, if you guys like the show, you can support it on Patreon. You can either join my Patreon on Hugo's Desk and support the show and have the show 3 days earlier. And also Ian's Patreon as well, if you want to support him there. You get the choice of picking which one you like the best out of the two hosts. Or if you want, you can support both of them. And you can also submit some questions as well if you want. If you have anything you want to submit, or if you want to talk to us to the show, just hit us up on Patreon. Yeah, that's how you can find us.
Awesome. And you can find me, obviously, at beforesandafters.com and Ian Fails on Twitter. Hugo, it's nice to talk about a film where we have some more to say than just we love it, we love it, we love it. So that was really fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was great. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. See you later. Bye.
Bye.